Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now here in the Jewel Garden, at this time of year, when everything is growing very fast, actually it's standing upright. It doesn't need supporting. And that's part of the beauty. Everything just seems to be full of enough energy and vigor to support itself, and that looks as though it'll go on being the case. But of course, experience shows that's not true. It would only take a really vigorous storm or even another few weeks of growth for things to start to flop and then break and fall. So a really good thing to do at this time of year is to stake plants that might need staking before they actually do. And that way, you're never recovering from disaster. So this delphinium, for example, very often they're staked with canes. You can use string, you can use brushwood. I like to use these metal supports that we make. We buy the wire, bend them round a log, and they last for years. Some of these I've had for about 30 years. And if I just go around it, just gently creating a support that isn't pushing the plant together, it's not forcing it to do anything that it doesn't want to do, but providing a support if it needs it. And if you do it now, very, very quickly, it all disappears under new growth. No one can see it, but the plant can use it if needed. God. Come on, Ed. Here on the mound, we made changes over winter because we used to have 2 beds where the paving slabs are. But it was all a bit tight and constrained, and you couldn't really see them, you couldn't get at them. And although I liked the contents of the beds, it wasn't working in terms of the space. So we've lifted all the plants, paved the area, so this is now a terrace. I've got 2 empty pots, so I'm going to plant them up just for this summer and make a summer display, and then I can rethink the whole thing in the autumn. The colour theme here on the mound is pale blue and soft yellow. Now, a big pot like this has a big hole, and this is where crocks come in. And this is perfect, because if you're using any type of crock, it must be curved. It's no good having a flat crock because that will just block the hole. Something that will keep the compost from falling through, but the water can get under and make its way out. So we'll put that over there. Okay. Now, I've made a special mix because the plants I've chosen are ones that thrive in relatively poor soil. So, this is a mixture of peat-free compost, plenty of grit, a bit of recycled compost from last year's tulips, and leaf mould and sieve garden compost. Now, obviously you can do a pot any way you want, but it's not a bad idea to remember the 3 words: a pillar, a filler, and a spiller. And obviously the pillar is the central, tallest element of the pot. The filler takes that middle ground, and the spiller you put on the edge and, as the name suggests, can spill out over the rim of the pot itself. Now, for my pillar, I've got this. This is a Phlomis russelliana. Soft yellow flowers, leaves coming from either side of the stem, and then the flowers are layered. Really dramatic plant. They can grow 4 or 5 foot tall, and I had them here in the borders, so I'm recycling plants that I know like it in this spot, and I know look really good, mixed in with all the other plants. Now, for my filler, I've chosen a grass. This is Festuca glauca Intense Blue. Obviously, you can see we've got the yellow of the Phlomis and the blue of the Festuca glauca. And obviously, a grass is the perfect filler, if you like, because it will keep going. As long as this has sunlight and really good drainage, it'll be happy. That one there. And that can go there like that. Now, my spiller, well, I have 2, actually. This is a petunia called Yellow Dream, And I've also got a lobelia, a blue. Now, I always cram these. You're going for maximum effect for what is essentially a maximum of 6 months, and probably more like about 4 or 5. So don't worry about overplanting. Now, Adam moved to a new garden in the winter. We visited him back in March, and now it's time to see how he's getting on.
I'm full of excitement. It may not be obvious to the eye yet, but I really can feel the character of my new garden starting to reveal itself. Welcome back to my new garden, which in all honesty is still very brown, but I've been a busy boy since you were last here. If you remember, I inherited a blank canvas, just a sloping plot of land running down from the house to the river. Once I'd worked out what I wanted, it hasn't taken long to make some pretty big changes. The fence down the side is complete. Hardcore has been laid for what will be the terrace, and different garden spaces have been levelled. I've planted loads of trees and even started work on the borders to get them ready for planting. Before we crack on with the borders, you might remember I planted a hornbeam hedge all the way down both sides of the garden. But I bought them as bare root plants, and I'm chuffed to pieces with them. So really, this year, it's about keeping them well watered, and then just keep this whole area clean of weed. But apart from that, they'll just be left alone just to let their roots into the ground. Right, come on, we're going to crack on. Come on. There's a lot of conversation, isn't there, about no dig, but if you move into a new build, or like me, a site where you really have not got an idea what is going on, then to dig it just makes perfect sense. So I use an old-fashioned method called single digging. I dig a trench that's a spade's depth, and then I put that soil in a wheelbarrow, move it to the end of the border. And then what I do is I use well-rotted manure. I put in probably about 50 mil. But you can use your own compost, composted bark, and you create your next trench by turning and filling the one you've just created. And then you work your way back. So I've done that, and then I've just left it for the winter. And a lot of people say to me, well, Frosty, why don't you just run a rotavator up and down? It'll be easier. The reason being, you see that is spineweed. So if I cut that into 30, 40 odd pieces with a rotavator, and it gets buried in there, it becomes 30 or 40 plants, you know. So it might feel as if, you know, it's hard work, but I know that by the time I actually plant, I'm hopefully going to be near on weed and stone free. While the borders are going to provide me with colour and interest across the year, I've really been thinking about the garden in layers, starting with the tree canopy. I've actually planted nearly 30 trees in the garden. I keep them well watered, not just this year, but next year as well. And there's no sense just coming out every day, giving everything a bit of a sprinkle. You better half an hour when you come home from work, fill the watering can up and do 4 trees really well. And then the next day do another 4 trees, you know. And it doesn't matter if I don't come back to the first tree for probably 4 or 5 days, because I've really soaked that soil. When it comes to designing, what I tend to do is choose the main tree. And here, it was the ginkgo. And then once that's in, I start to build the other trees around it. And I'm looking for different shapes and forms. And I think that's not just in isolation in this garden, that's then starting to look at what's in the distance. So I can connect the garden to what's going on outside. When it comes to planting design, I always think about a garden as a woodland. It's got that upper story, that's the bigger trees. Round here, you've got brambles, that's representation of the shrubs. Then you've got the ferns, the brackens, that is your herbaceous perennials. And then at the moment, around here, you've got the bluebells, that's your bulbs. The easiest way for me to do it, normally, is yes, I do it on a plan, but also in my own garden, once my trees are in place, and I'll imagine them at full height, full shape and form, and then I just sort of react. So I work out where I might put shrubs, and I'm thinking, well, I've got the height of the tree, shrub in there, that'll help bring that canopy down. And then you come out and you have a look and think, well, if I went further down the border, in there, and then I'm sort of drawn into sort of here, and all right, it wouldn't be anything high. So if I now just take that off, you start to get a feel. Let's just have one last look. And yeah, I think there'll be an opportunity for something maybe rounded about that height. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay like that, but it's a starting point. Around the front of the house, there will eventually be a small courtyard garden. But for now, I'm planting up some pots with Osmanthus burkwoodii, an evergreen shrub that has beautiful white-scented flowers in spring, and they don't mind being clipped. So the mix I'm using is peat-free, multi-purpose compost, but what I've done is I've worked in a bag of topsoil. Anything I think that's more long-term, that's going to go in a container, I like to add some soil. Let's see how, hey, look at that. So now you can see this root system. What I'm going to do is just slightly stir with a white fibrous root. That will encourage the plant to put on more root, which means it will stabilise quicker. We lower in. So all I want to do, make sure there's no real air pockets, so you can work that in with your hand. Lovely jubbly. That's that. And now the fun bit. I'm just going to go in. The idea is it will look like these little series of clouds that give you sort of a real architectural backdrop, really. There's something wonderful about the idea of creating something, for your family, and yeah, I think it's going to be a special garden. I really do.
Really good advice about working off trees and their final height. But what struck me was all credit to Adam for single digging. I single dug this garden and it took me years. And I know how much hard work it is. And it's not very fashionable at the moment, but sometimes you have to do it. And investing in the soil is investing in the future. This is the season of cow parsley. Now, cow parsley is, I think, the most beautiful flower in the world. Partly because it's lovely in its own right, but also because of the way that it grows. It forms this wonderful dancing froth, and we're blessed to have it here in the garden, but only because this floods and it brings the seed in. And it does spread around the garden a little, but not really as much as this. So what I've done in the writing garden is inspired by cow parsley. Now, obviously, to follow that inspiration on, starting in February and carrying on into October or even November, you can't just use umbellifers like cow parsley. So we start off with bulbs, daffodils and tulips in here, and then we follow that up with Leucojum summer snowflakes. And they are beautiful, but they are thugs. The snowflake is really happy in heavy clay, in damp, shady conditions. So putting it in here was probably a mistake, because despite its beauty, what you get is a very, very long, slow dying back. These are the leaves of the snowflake. You can see there are the seed heads of the flower. And these will stay looking green and strong for another 4, 5, 6 weeks, which means they're filling the space. So that's my fault. What I'm going to do is take out half of the leucojum and I'll plant the bulbs into the orchard, and that will create space that I can plant the ammi and the wild carrot and also the lovage. So what I can do is just bundle these together like this, stick them in a upcycled plastic pot, a little bit of compost. And when the leaves are completely died back, you can then either dig them up and store them in somewhere dry and just have the bulbs, or just label it, and then come October, November, then you can plant them out as bulbs when it's a lot easier. And the really important part for any bulb is dying back. The biggest mistake, if you want bulbs to flower next year, is to cut back the foliage after flowering, because that is going to feed into next year's bulb. This is a slow job, because I want to make sure I'm not doing any damage. But having started it, I'll work through it over the next day or two, and that will transform the garden. Now, not very far from here, down the south of the county, is somebody who not only wants her garden to look good, but she wants it to taste good too.
Wild food knocks cultivated food out the park for the nutrition. It's delicious. Foraging just utterly connects you to nature and to plants in a way that nothing else does. It's made me wonder, once you get that spark of wondering about stuff, then there's no better place to be. I'm Liz Knight, and this is my garden in South Herefordshire. This beautiful array of flowers is ground elder. Most people, if they had it in their garden, would rip it out before it went to flower, which is a real shame. You can either kind of curse it and kind of spend your life trying to get rid of it, or you can embrace it. Not only does it create beautiful flowers in the garden, it's also a really good cut flower plant. It's also incredibly important for pollinators and delicious as a food. ground alder has got a flavour that crosses between parsley and carrot. It's got a tiny hint of kind of like lemony citrusiness to it. So it works amazingly in any recipe that calls for parsley. And one of the easiest ways to use it is to chop them up really finely and put them with lemon and garlic and pistachio nuts. And then they make just a really lovely loose pesto dressing that you could put on things like roast carrots. But you've got to get your head around the fact that it's not a thuggish weed, that it's a beautiful thing, and that will make it taste even more delicious. It's really important that you take your time and you take foraging in baby steps and you only pick plants you really, really know. So I always say to people, you only ever pick really easy to identify plants. Don't ever take any risks with eating anything that you're not 100% sure about. There are so many things that you can use to make delicious dressings for sort of salads. So things like potato salads go really well with mustard family plants. The kind of plants which grow kind of as wild plants in my garden are jack by the hedge. It's otherwise known as garlic mustard. It's got lots of different names, all related to onion and garlic and mustard, because it's got the flavour of all three of those in it. And then on the other side of me are two other different types of mustard plants. So here is, you might recognise as Honesty, which has got lovely mauve-coloured flowers, and the whole thing, again, is edible. So Honesty has got quite mild-tasting leaves and quite sweet, mild flowers. And then when the seeds suddenly emerge, these seeds taste really, really quite hot, and then you can use those like the most powerful kind of wild equivalent of a wasabi. If you like wasabi heat, then you might really love this plant. This is Ditanda, and you'll often find it growing wild in coastal areas. And if you try it, after a few chews, it'll make your mouth curl in a really delicious way. It's not just wild plants or weeds that you can forage. Huge amounts of the plants that we have in our gardens as ornamentals are actually edible, and they've got a long history of being used as food. One of the most delicious and kind of oldest of plants that we've got in our gardens is roses, and we have been eating roses for thousands and thousands of years. Every different type of rose has a different scent and a different flavour, and they are all edible. One thing I love to do with kind of especially large, blousy ornamental roses is if you pick them whole, you can put them in the freezer whole and they freeze perfectly. And then when you want to use them, you literally can just take them out the freezer and crush them up, and they'll break into the tiniest flecks of pink, but with beautiful flavour. And you can stir those through fruit, strawberries or cream, and it adds a delicious, really vibrant, fresh flavour to things. I often get asked by people when I'm teaching foraging courses, or I used to get asked, do you ever get ill? And then last year I found a lump, and it turned out to be the lump you don't want to have, so I had an early stage cancer. Foraging and just being in nature, just being in the garden, even through the depths of winter, I know helped me so much through this sort of ultimate kind of winter that I've had, where I lost all my hair, you lose your identity. So I'd come out with my bald head in the winter and sit with the plants, and like all the plants would tighten buds, so my blackcurrant bushes all had these little buds on them, and I'd come out and find myself talking to the buds going, in the spring, we're going to be back. Fortunately, my cancer is treatable, but you still have to face, in a way, your mortality, and I'm convinced that I was able to do it because I was able to get out into nature. So these, in my kind of veg plot, are hostas that most people will have in their ornamental gardens rather than their veg beds. But I grow them here because I eat them. And amazingly, I think that the slugs don't like to go for them so much because there's so many other plants around that they kind of get at. So I tend to kind of do quite well with them here. And hostas might not seem like a vegetable to most people in Britain, but actually they are really delicious and they're a really commonly used vegetable, especially in Japan. It's the same family of plant as asparagus, and when you cut into it, you can kind of see the tenderness that you'd get when you snap open an asparagus, and it's got a very, very similar flavour, and you can use it in an identical way. So it's delicious, steamed, with a bit of butter. It's also just lovely kind of chopped into things like quiches. And the lovely thing about a hosta's variegation in leaves, they will keep that variegation and they'll keep that pattern, so you have the most beautiful food made from hosta, but obviously you want to go for ones that the snail hasn't eaten already. But there's not a lot better than getting your own back on the snails that eat all of your hosta than eating the hostas first. I think foraging has made me realise how incredibly beautiful the world is, and how lucky we are to be here, and it's made me feel incredibly lucky. Eating the plants which kind of want to grow around us and which are there voluntarily, there's something that just really roots you to your landscape, to your history. Wild food completely changes the flavours that you've got on your table, and it makes how we eat hyper-seasonal, kind of full of vibrant flavours and colour and beauty, and kind of paired with a little bit of butter, makes everything taste delicious.
There is a moment here, it probably lasts a few days, when this is one of the things I love most in the garden at this time of year. Two very ordinary plants. You have two viburnums side by side. This is Viburnum opulus, and this is Viburnum plicatum morisii. And the Viburnum opulus starts out with slightly green, just touched with green flowers, which then become brilliant white, sort of pom-poms, almost looking like a hydrangea pom-pom. And the Viburnum plicatum morisii famously is in layers, and also looking like hydrangea plants, but this time very open, with white bracts and then little yellow flowers in the middle. And they're just perfect. They're very simple, but absolutely at their best. This particular corner of the garden is the first to flood, and so on a winter like the one we've just had, this can be underwater for weeks on end. And all the plants in here, from the biggest tree to the smallest plant, have to be able not just to cope with that degree of winter wet, but also to thrive. And as long as you bear that in mind, you can use it to your advantage. Now, this corner is north-facing, so it only gets dappled light at the best of times, working its way through the high hornbeam hedge behind it. I call it Hosta Corner because hostas love it. And I've got in my hand ligularias, and wherever hostas are happy, the chances are ligularias are going to be happy too. This is Ligularia the rocket, and this is blessed with the name of Ligularia przewalskii. And this, of course, has much more cut leaves, and you can grow it for the foliage alone. The foliage is great, but the flowers are good too. And these are ones with tall yellow flowers, and they're wonderful for insects, butterflies, bees. So, there's lots to be gained from growing them as long as you don't expect them to perform in full sun. With a plant like Ligularia, and any damp-loving plant, when you buy it, take it home and give it a really good soak. Either put it in a bucket of water or a dish of water and leave it for at least half an hour, and then drain off the excess before you plant it. There we go. I have to. Okay. Just like that. That's beautiful. The foliage will rise up above the line of the hostas, and then in July and August it will throw up these tall spires of yellow flower that will be 4 or 5 foot high, looking really good and completely happy in this shady, damp corner. Now we're going to Cumbria to join a couple who are preparing plants very different to Ligularias as they get ready for showing them at RHS Chelsea.
The auriculas dry out very quickly if we've got strong winds coming through. Last night we had a really bad northeasterly wind blowing like a tumble dryer.
We find the wind quite a challenge.
The wind.
I find David's grumbling about the wind an even greater challenge.
I'm David
And I'm Gail.
and we've been gardening here at Somerdale House for the last 30 years.
It's in the South Lake District.
When we came here, the garden was overgrown with brambles.
And hadn't been gardened for about 40 years.
No, that's
we
right.
think.
So that's when Gail started propagating plants in earnest, so we could fill the garden with plants. And then we kept getting more and more plants that were too many to sell at garden open days. So that's when Gail took the decision to open a small nursery.
And then David decided he'd take early retirement and join me. My daughter gave me a couple of named auriculas, and the obsession just grew and grew and grew until we've ended up with over 500 varieties of auriculas. Oh dear. The auriculas are divided into different categories. Best known category is probably the alpine auriculas, and that's subdivided into light-centred and gold-centred auriculas. And then border auriculas, which are ones that have been grown for a long time in cottage gardens. Then double auriculas. And then there are the show auriculas, and they're divided into ones called selfs, which have solid petal colours, stripes and edges. Well, there are so many beautiful flowers, and what's my favourite today won't be my favourite tomorrow. That one's called Strawberry Fields, and that's quite a nice one. That's one of my all-time favourites. It's called Twiggy. It's a pale yellow self. These are all the plants, 1,600, that we have collected as potentials for showing at Chelsea. It's a misconception that auriculas are tricky to grow. There are two things they really hate. One is the midday sun in summer, and the other is to get very wet in winter. So they can be grown in the garden, although in Cumbria it's a bit trickier because we have a very high rainfall. We grow all ours in tunnels. We put shading over the tunnels in summer, but we take it all off in winter.
I mean, at the end of the day, an auricula, it's an alpine plant, so it just don't like to be too wet in the winter.
Like all primulas, auriculas are susceptible to vine weevil, root aphid and various other diseases, so potting them into fresh compost every year helps to reduce the number of diseases, and also you get more plants.
I think the challenge with showing auriculas at Chelsea is generally they would have finished by the time of the Chelsea Flower Show, so we're doing everything we can to try and keep back as many we can that are still in bud and hopefully show a wide range of all the different varieties so people can see what's available, and we're using every trick in the book, tried or untested, to see if we can achieve that. So these have been sat in the fridge for a good couple of months now. No light or anything, just 4 degrees constantly, and they sort of are just sitting there. Once we get them out into the light, a bit of sun, hopefully they'll open normally. But the key thing is deciding when to take them out, which is a bit unfathomable. People are used to seeing the very grand displays at Chelsea, and I think we wanted to try and do something a little different. Whether the public and the judges will like that, we don't know, but we wanted to make it more approachable and on a scale that people could see for themselves how they might display auriculas in their own garden rather than in a very formal setting.
However small it is. Been nervous for about the last 2 months.
Anxiety dreams.
It'll only get better.
I worry about whether sheep are going to break into the nursery, which they do from time to time, and
They
eat
do.
all the auriculas. I'm not kidding. I just find the wind picks up just before a show to stress things, and then...
Yes, and the sun comes out, so everything gets dry, and
And then you have snow.
you don't. Let's have Piglet. Put Piglet in there.
Ta-da!
Then there's the worry, provided we get enough plants that are in perfect flower for Chelsea, just getting them down from here to Chelsea.
People will use things like refrigerated transport, but because we're a fairly small display, it's not really practical for us to do that. So we're going to cram them all into the back of the car, turn the air conditioning on full,
Charge
and
down
get
there.
as cold as possible, and then hopefully they'll make it to the show.
So, wear my down jacket.
I'm not sure I envy David and Gail's journey down from the Lake District with the car as cold as possible to keep the auriculas looking really good, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. And I will go and see them at Chelsea next week. Now, here is a comparison for you. In this bed are planted Charlotte potatoes. I chitted them, planted them out at Easter. I also planted radish in there, which is why it's covered with radishes, which I have to say are ready to eat. But the potatoes in there are, you're seeing about that much growth, but it's good and sturdy and completely healthy. Within minutes of planting these, I had a couple of seed potatoes left over, which I put into a pot, this pot. And look at the difference in growth. Now, this has been in the wooden greenhouse, not heated, but just in the greenhouse. And that much protection makes a huge difference. It's just dramatically ahead of the others. These now are rather floppy and showing lots of leaf. Those are good and solid and just beginning. But this needs earthing up. Earthing up is something you do for two reasons. One, because if potatoes are exposed to light, they turn green, and that's poisonous. So you earth them up to make sure that they're all covered, and that certainly will be the case in this pot. The other reason is, particularly for early potatoes, is if there's a risk of frost, that will kill any top growth. So if you protect it with soil, that protects the growth that's there, and that very quickly grows through the soil. At this time of year, not much risk of frost, but there is a slight risk, certainly in the pot, of tubers being exposed, so I'm going to earth it up. And earthing up's dead easy. I've got a bucket of normal potting compost, and I'm just going to pour it in to bury the stems that are there. Now let's lift that up a bit. They actually need quite a lot of space. So in a pot that size, 2 is plenty. Now, let's pull up some radish. See, these radish I sowed exactly 6 weeks ago. So it's really the quickest harvest you can get in the vegetable garden. I will wash these and then eat them, and actually the French way of eating them with a dab of butter. Absolutely delicious. I've got some leeks here, which I sowed actually last year in December. Leeks do very well from seed, and there are 2 ways of planting them. You can either plant them individually, which is the conventional way and the way I was brought up to do it. However, I have, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, been growing my leeks in pots, in blocks, and I scatter the seed, and in some cases, you know, there are 3 or 4 in a pot, other cases just 1 or 2. But the idea is you plant each pot and bury it a little bit deeper than it is in the pot, and you dig up a clump of leeks. And you still get decent-sized leeks, but it's easier to harvest them. So if I just space these out, like that, just make sure that they're equal, either side of the board, which is really useful. So a nice deep hole, pop that in there, bury it well, and then cover it up. Everything above ground will remain green, everything below ground will be white. This is a variety called Lancia. You can harvest these, well, as early as late July, whereas most varieties are for autumn and winter. But it's not too late to sow leeks. And if you want to sow leeks now, do so. You can sow them outside in a drill, you can sow them inside, but don't sow them into a seed tray. If you're going to sow them inside, sow them straight into pots or modules, because they do need depth to their roots. And then you lift them and plant them out in a wider spacing. Now I'm spacing these out about 6 inches apart. Okay, I will get the next tray in, and while I'm doing this, we're going to join Francis, who's visiting a garden with a very particular approach to horticulture.
I've always been drawn to gardeners who see the world a little differently. That curiosity has brought me to Waltham Place in Berkshire, 220 acres where every decision is guided by the quiet, unseen rhythms of biodynamics. Andre Tranquillini leads his team in a way that defy many of horticulture's familiar rules. There's an air of mystery to biodynamics, a sense that it's as much about spirit as it is about soil. I've come to uncover what that really means in practice. So, Andre, what is biodynamic gardening?
We are creating a self-sustaining garden where all the different elements are in synergy, are in balance. Instead of weeding things out, immediately we allow things to express themselves.
That's so interesting. So you let the garden in many ways choose how it is.
Finding how much to interfere, finding that language, you know, that conversation with the garden. That's what we're encouraging all gardeners to do. You know, learn from the land, not impose too much.
It sounds like it's quite complicated.
It is not. It's a lot about common sense. What is complicated, actually, is to be able to step back and develop those intuitive skills as well to allow the garden to speak.
Can we have a look around?
Yeah, let's explore.
Okay. It seems every ornamental garden here reflects this return to nature and a gentle step away from strict formality. But one space, more than any other, captures the spirit of this approach.
So, this is the potager.
This is
It's amazing.
gorgeous.
There's so much happening. We love it. We love it.
Look at it.
Yeah.
There's just so many flowers. Wow, it's incredible. How much is planned?
This garden is naturally evolving. Of course, it has been gardened for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So there's some of that, inheritance still living.
Yes.
We tend to plug in a few annuals here and there, but it's mostly self-seeded. We're really allowing this garden to express itself. Yeah, and that's what it's doing.
It certainly is. It's absolutely beautiful. You have what a lot of people would call weeds here. So
Yeah.
there's buttercups and docks particularly. And yet they sit in this landscape so beautifully, especially that dock, the colour of it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Absolutely. Everything is playing a part here.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly intervening and cutting things back, we don't learn what is the role. So in biodynamic gardening, we allow plants to express their true nature.
This is obviously a big, very full space.
Yeah.
That could be quite daunting, but it feels like this could be applicable on a smaller scale as well.
Absolutely. And from all of our gardens, this is the one we think that, people can take some of these ideas and implement at home.
Yeah. Over in the kitchen garden, there are over 60 varieties of veg, from things like crystal lemon cucumbers to chard. Andre's team use a number of techniques to fine-tune the way they work with their crops. One of the main things I know about biodynamics, and I don't fully understand it, is with biodynamic gardening, there's an element where you're doing your gardening tasks according to the lunar calendar. But could you explain how that works?
Absolutely. With biodynamics, we're always trying to optimize the resources that are available to us. As we know, the moon has got an influence on tides, has got an influence on water. Why would not have an influence on plant sap, on plant growth? So we tend to sow our seeds just before full moon. So leading up to that, including the full moon days, one can really see increased germination, really amazing vigor. The other aspect that we're looking is when to transplant. So the calendar for 2 weeks of the month suggests it is ideal transplanting time in the northern hemisphere. That is because the moon is getting closer to the earth. So the gravitational pull is different, so it's an ideal time for roots to develop.
What would you say to somebody who was a little bit sceptical?
Try it out, experiment with it. Start recording the results and just see how it feels.
Yeah.
And the results that you get.
Can I see some of this produce?
Yeah, let's see. Look at this, Francis.
Oh, wow.
Isn't this
They're
great?
absolutely perfect. Can you tell the difference between a biodynamically grown vegetable and another?
One of them I can hear as you take them out.
What, that?
The rustling.
Squeaking.
Yeah.
I'm just trying desperately not to pull out other ones as I bring
No,
it
go
out.
for it.
Why?
Yeah, but it's exactly that, the vitality on the leaves,
Yeah.
that sound. That's something I always want to hear on a leafy vegetable. We work with open pollinated seeds. We produce all our compost. We also make our own foliar feed. We use things like nettle tea, comfrey tea as well. So there's a variety of methods that we use that can definitely help with quality.
Yeah. Another key principle of biodynamics is community. Andre fosters that spirit, bringing the team together, often to nurture the land and their connection to one another. So what's happening here today then?
Well, today we've got a really favourable time for planting a whole lot of golden chamomile or dyer's chamomile, Anthemis tincturia. We're growing this for biodynamic certified textiles. So clothes are going to be dyed with this. With these single crop, it's a little bit monotonous. So what
Yeah.
we tried to do to shake it up a bit is plant our diversity islands on the ends of the bed.
We are trying to encourage all sorts of predators and wildlife and insects to be around the plants to be able to help with things like aphids and different types of pests.
Seeing how Andre and the team work so closely with nature to create a thriving, balanced space really makes me wonder about what this could mean for our own gardens and where we might begin.
I would encourage people to start by composting, looking at that nutrient cycle and ideally addressing that from within the garden. And I am aware that for small gardens that can also be an issue, not having enough material at the right time. So I would encourage people to join local community composting schemes and collaborate with neighbors and finding ways to compost together as well. And secondly, start to increasing the biodiversity of the garden. It is our main tool to prevent issues with pests and diseases. So we tend to say at least 20% of a productive space should be set aside for biodiversity.
It's been so fascinating meeting Andre and hearing all about his ethos and how he works within that biodynamic system. And if there's one thing I've taken away from what that means, it's working with the rhythms that nature has anyway. If we slow down and observe rather than always feeling the need to act, then that will do the same thing. And if we don't go the whole hog into biodynamics, I think those little lessons can be wonderful places to start within our own gardens.
I'm not just tidying up, I'm actually harvesting a crop. Well, actually, no, not a crop. Harvesting a feed for plants, because nettles make really good plant food because they're very high in nitrogen. Just gather them up like this. Pop them in there. Right, that'll do for the moment, because this is not an end in itself, but stage one of a process. Right, Ned, this is how we make nettle feed, okay? Pay attention. You need to cut it up as small as you can. This is where the shears come in. A scythe won't do this job very well. So I just literally, you can do this in a bucket, you can do it in a barrow like this, but chop it up with a pair of shears. And the reason why you chop it up is because you're increasing the surface area, and then it'll break down quicker when you put it into liquid. Okay, that'll do. Gloves on. You need a bucket or a trug. Now, having filled the bucket as full as you can, what you want to do is then cover that with water. And go on until you can see the water rise up to the surface. Perfect. Put that somewhere out the way, where it's not going to be disturbed, and leave it for 3 to 4 weeks. At the end of that time, strain it off, and what you have is the feed. You then dilute. And what it is, it's a high nitrogen feed. So the beauty of nettle feed is it encourages growth in plants. Not flowers, not fruit, or even particularly root growth. It encourages green growth. So not only are you clearing nettles where you don't want them, but you're putting them to good use. If you've got some nettles, I would highly recommend that you make some nettle tea this weekend. If you haven't got nettles, you're not off the hook, because here are some more jobs for the weekend. If, like me, you have dahlias temporarily growing in pots, but you can't plant them out because either you don't have enough space or where you live there's still a risk of frost, it's a good idea to pinch out the tops, cutting down to a pair of leaves, and this will encourage the plant to produce side shoots, which in turn will carry more flowers, and also means that although it will delay flowering by a week or two, it will extend flowering in early autumn by up to a month. Carrots grow very well in a container as long as it's deep enough and has drainage holes. Fill it with a free-draining compost, and in practice that means adding some grit or sand to a peat-free compost. Sprinkle the seed lightly on the surface, cover them over using your fingers or a little rake, and then water. And they should germinate in a couple of weeks' time. All clematis are growing very fast, but in particular the late-flowering ones, group 3. They do become self-supporting once they reach a certain height, but the new shoots are very fragile and can easily break in a wind. So tie them up carefully using soft twine so as not to damage them, and within a week or two, they should be entirely self-supporting. What have you got? Was that good? Yeah! Come on! Brilliant catching. You're such a good catcher. Look at that! I have to say that this goes on at breakfast every single day. I'm trying to eat my toast and marmalade, and this ball is put in my lap, usually slightly slimy. Now, I won't be here next week, because it is the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, and I and most of the team will be there all week. The first programme is on Sunday, and it runs every day till the following Saturday. Masses to see. It's one of the great highlights of the year, so do join us there. And I'll be back here in a couple of weeks' time. Till then, bye-bye.